comment was driven by his relationship with Brown.
To me, Tatum's kind of a passive-aggressive puss.
They weren't friends. Yep. They didn't hang together.
This, to me, speaks to his personality and how he deals with these kind of things.
They never really rocked with each other off the court.
Jayson Tatum wanted Jaylen traded. Fact.
Gather around, ladies and gentlemen, because your boy has some fresh tea to spill. Anybody want a cup? Mrs. Nesbitt, this one's for you. Jayson Tatum is standing inside a recreation center in St. Louis at his own foundation's basketball camp, speaking to a gym packed with kids about what it really means to be a leader. Nothing unusual at first. He's telling them to stay humble, ask questions, and never act like you already know everything. Classic Jayson Tatum advice. But then he says this.
I don't know it all. I'll be the first person to say that. Being around somebody that feel like they know it all, I don't want to be around that person. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I want to learn from somebody else.
On the surface, that sounds like something you'd find inside a fortune cookie. It's exactly the kind of message you'd expect from Jayson Tatum. He's always trying to come across as humble, almost like he's dropping life lessons every time he speaks. Pretty standard Jayson Tatum philosophy. But here's where things get interesting. Just 3 weeks earlier, that exact phrase, the smartest guy in the room, was the same wording 2 NBA executives reportedly used on national television to describe Jaylen Brown. Brown didn't let that slide either. He jumped on a live stream and blasted those comments. Then, not long after, Jayson Tatum posted that clip of himself using the exact same phrase on his own Instagram story. For nearly a month, the entire conversation about whether there was tension between Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown, whether there was a real divide, or whether they could continue playing together, was built almost entirely on anonymous reports and speculation. There was never any concrete proof these two couldn't stand each other. Really, the only thing we had was Jaylen Brown saying this on Twitch after the Celtics blew a 3-1 series lead to what would eventually become his new team. Honestly, this was the most fun season I've ever had playing basketball. At the same time, I was wondering if Jayson Tatum might have been carrying a little frustration after Jaylen Brown won both the Eastern Conference Finals MVP and NBA Finals MVP during Boston's 2024 championship run. But here's the difference now. Jayson Tatum has officially attached himself to the conversation. Whether he intended to or not, he put his stamp on it and made people think, okay, maybe there really was something going on here. And once you understand what this situation is actually about, you'll realize this didn't begin 3 weeks ago. This has been building for nearly a decade. Before we dive any deeper, we're doing a massive Grand Theft Auto 6 giveaway here on the channel. All you have to do is subscribe and turn on notifications. I'm also running the same giveaway over on Instagram, X, Snapchat, TikTok, and my second channel, Flight Mike TV. Now that we've got that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check, 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? To understand why a leadership speech at a kid's basketball camp suddenly became national news, we have to rewind 3 weeks. Boston trades Jaylen Brown to Philadelphia, and almost immediately, anonymous reports start surfacing. But the most notable comments came from Colin Cowherd. I had 2 NBA sources tell me tonight that Jaylen Brown has, it's almost like a disease. He suddenly thinks he's the smartest guy in every room he's in. A disease. That's the word they used to describe a player who had won NBA Finals MVP for that franchise just 2 years earlier. Jaylen Brown didn't stay quiet. The very next day, he addressed it head-on during a Twitch stream. He explained that intelligence comes in many different forms and said he's never walked around believing he was the smartest person in any room. Then he challenged the entire idea behind the criticism. I've never told anybody I'm the smartest guy in the room. Maybe that's how they interpreted it. No disrespect to everyone in sports, but the standard for intelligence in sports is pretty low. And that's where the story stood. Anonymous criticism, a public response, and then everything seemed to cool off. Until Jayson Tatum stepped into that gym in St. Louis and repeated the exact same phrase. And here's the important part. This isn't just me trying to connect random dots. Brandon Jennings, someone who spent a decade in the NBA, watched the clip and immediately said what a lot of people were already thinking. He reposted it and wrote, "Motivational message my ass." In his eyes, that was a direct shot at Jaylen Brown. Now, I do want to be completely fair here because that part actually matters. Now, to be fair, Jayson Tatum has never actually said he was talking about Jaylen Brown, not even once. Every major outlet that covered the story used words like seemingly because technically it's possible this was nothing more than a coincidence, a player giving a routine leadership speech to a group of kids. That's absolutely possible. But when you look at the full context, it's hard not to raise an eyebrow. Think about everything happening around him. Jaylen Brown has just been traded to what might be the most exciting team in the Eastern Conference. The 76ers suddenly look loaded. They've got Joel Embiid, Jaylen Brown, Tyrese Maxey, VJ Edgecombe, and LeBron James. Veterans are reportedly willing to take buyouts just for a chance to join them. There are even rumors about Ben Simmons returning to back up Embiid. Philadelphia is buzzing with excitement. Meanwhile, Boston is left with a 36-year-old Paul George. So you're telling me that while all of this is unfolding, Jayson Tatum just happens to use the exact phrase that's already become attached to the biggest conversation surrounding his former teammate? He didn't just say something similar. He repeated the same wording, then shared the clip himself on Instagram. You can decide how much of that is coincidence. I'm simply laying out the timeline. Because this story isn't really about a leadership speech at summer camp. It's about nearly a decade of history. Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown spent 9 seasons together in Boston, 9 playoff appearances, 2 trips to the NBA Finals, 1 championship. On paper, they became one of the best young duos the league has seen in the last 20 years. But beneath all of that success, one question never truly disappeared. Whose team was it? The situation was always unusual. Jayson Tatum became the face of the franchise. He was the higher draft pick, the first-team All-NBA player, the one featured on the billboards and marketed as Boston's superstar. But Jaylen Brown actually arrived first. Boston drafted him in 2016, 1 year before Tatum, and he never seemed interested in simply accepting the role of sidekick. Every season, the same conversation returned. Who's the alpha? Then 2024 made that discussion even more uncomfortable. Boston finally won a championship, but when the individual awards were handed out, they didn't go to Jayson Tatum. Jaylen Brown captured both the Eastern Conference Finals MVP and NBA Finals MVP. The face of the franchise finally won his first title, yet it was his running mate holding both trophies. Publicly, nobody said a word. Everybody smiled. Everybody celebrated. Everybody raised the banner.
But it's hard to believe something like that didn't affect anyone behind the scenes. Then last season changed everything. Tatum suffered a torn Achilles and missed almost the entire year, appearing in only 16 games. For the first time, Jaylen Brown had the Celtics entirely to himself. No sharing, no debates, just his team. And he delivered. Career highs across the board, 28.7 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 5.1 assists per game. Second-team All-NBA, 6th in MVP voting. He carried a roster many expected to be in the lottery to 56 wins and the number 2 seed. Then, after the season ended, Brown said something that reignited the entire conversation. He called that season, the one where Boston lost in the first round while Tatum was injured, the most enjoyable season of his career. Not the championship season, the season where he became the unquestioned centerpiece. Read that again for a second and imagine hearing it if you're Jayson Tatum. Your teammate's favorite season was the one where you weren't playing. For a lot of people, that's when the mask slipped. It's also when many started wondering whether these two could really keep this partnership going forever. Then came the trade, and almost immediately, the leaks followed. Within 24 hours, all the things nobody had publicly discussed for 9 years suddenly started coming out. Questions about personalities, comments about the smartest guy in the room, reports claiming people around Tatum weren't thrilled with Brown calling last season his favorite. And when Jaylen Brown officially said goodbye to Boston, one name stood out because it wasn't there. He thanked Neemias Queta, he thanked Luka Garza, but after spending nearly a decade alongside Jayson Tatum and winning a championship together, he never mentioned Tatum. Then watch what happened whenever someone in Boston was asked about it. Nobody wanted ownership of the decision. Brad Stevens was asked directly how much input Jayson Tatum had regarding the trade. His answer? None. Then Joe Mazzulla got the same question. How much input did he have? Again, the response was essentially the same. There was organizational alignment, there were conversations, but no suggestion that either Tatum or the coaching staff drove the decision. So that's the official version. The franchise player had no input. The head coach had no input. One executive made the move and everyone else simply accepted it. That's the story Boston continues to stand behind. And to be completely fair to Joe Mazzulla, he handled the entire situation with real class. He never took a shot at Jaylen Brown, quite the opposite. He said Jaylen made him a better coach. He talked about how Brown challenged him, challenged himself, and pushed the locker room every single day. He said people should focus on appreciating everything Jaylen gave the organization during his decade in Boston. Those are the words of someone who genuinely enjoyed coaching him, which makes the contrast even louder. The coach publicly praised Jaylen Brown just weeks after the trade. Meanwhile, the teammate who spent 9 years beside him left a clip talking about not wanting to be around people who think they already know everything. One had nothing but appreciation. The other left people reading between the lines. And that's where this stops feeling like harmless summer gossip and starts looking like one of next season's biggest storylines. Normally, when a star gets traded, the rivalry cools off. Maybe he heads to the Western Conference. Maybe you only see him twice a year. Everybody moves on. That's not what happened here. Boston traded Jaylen Brown to a division rival. Now these two are going to see each other all the time. The preseason schedule is already set. Boston faces Philadelphia on October 10th at TD Garden and again on October 16th in Philadelphia. Then they'll meet 4 more times during the regular season. That's already 6 matchups before you even consider the playoffs. And if they meet again in the postseason, remember, they already faced each other in the first round last year when Boston blew a 3-1 series lead to Philadelphia. Add another playoff series, and we're suddenly talking about double-digit meetings in a single season. Circle October 10th. That's Jaylen Brown returning to TD Garden for the first time wearing a 76ers jersey. Back in the building where he won a championship. Back in front of the fans Brad Stevens admitted he lost sleep thinking about. Standing on the opposite sideline, Jayson Tatum. 9 years of whose team is it? A month of speculation. And now, whether intentional or not, a message that has everyone talking. Tatum has already admitted it will feel strange seeing Jaylen in a different uniform after spending so many years together. Strange. I guess that's one way to describe it. So what do I think actually happened? Honestly, I don't think there's a villain. I think 2 elite players were drafted 1 year apart into the exact same organization and spent nearly a decade being told only one of them could truly be the guy. Despite all of that, they still reached 2 NBA Finals and won a championship together. That's exhausting. Eventually, once they were no longer teammates and nobody had to protect the locker room anymore, some of that built-up tension naturally came out. Jaylen expressed his feelings on a live stream. Tatum may have done it through a speech at a youth camp. That's not some huge scandal. It's simply what happens when 2 people spend 9 years constantly being compared before finally no longer having to pretend those comparisons never affected them. I also believe multiple things can be true at once. If the NBA's new collective bargaining agreement and second apron rules didn't exist, I think Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown would probably still be teammates today. Financial reality forced Boston into an incredibly difficult decision. Considering the season Brown had, the return they received doesn't feel close to his actual value. But that's the reality of the new salary cap landscape. Without those restrictions, I think Boston would gladly keep this duo together for another run. They reached 2 finals, they won a championship. Their success speaks for itself. Money, more than anything else, drove this trade, not because Jayson Tatum suddenly couldn't stand Jaylen Brown. The one thing I still can't fully figure out is this: why did Boston ultimately choose Tatum? Remember, Tatum is coming back from a torn Achilles, an injury that historically changes careers. Meanwhile, Brown is coming off arguably the best season of his life. Did Boston simply believe Tatum remains the better overall player? Or was personality part of the equation? Tatum rarely creates headlines. He avoids controversy. He isn't live streaming responses or publicly challenging narratives. There's plenty to think about. Here's what stands out to me. Jayson Tatum has spent 9 years in the NBA and has built a reputation as one of the league's most media-trained superstars. You almost never hear him say anything that becomes controversial. So the idea that this exact phrase, the same one dominating NBA discussions about Jaylen Brown for weeks, just accidentally slipped out during a speech and then accidentally ended up on his own Instagram story. Come on. I'm not saying he's lying. I'm saying he's smart enough to understand exactly how those words would be interpreted. And honestly, that might be the most interesting part of this entire story, because Jayson Tatum taking a subtle shot feels far more out of character than Jaylen Brown firing one back. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you believe there's really a cold war between Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown? I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I'm your boy Mike, and I'll catch you all in the next upload.